Hi everyone, this is group 4 and my name is Adit. So let's start with the first question. What are the messages that you received in your culture of origin or family of origin about mental health or mental illness? So I was born and raised in Hungary, which is in Europe, and mental health was technically non-existent in my country or that part of the country that I came from. And anybody who seemed unusual or, a little bit depressed, a little bit this or that, they were considered crazy. And that's the word that I can translate from my language to English, how they described those people. So the message was that those people are crazy, and then there's no such a thing as somebody mentally ill.
Hello, everybody. My name is Fernando Villalobos, and well, in my culture, I am Mexican born and raised in the United States. In Mexico, the norm over there is the male is dominant and the female is submissive. So, of course, with this being said, they don't. A lot of people in Mexico don't believe in mental illness, especially if you're like living in like a province or a real rural area. Um, Males, if you see them with like a mental health issue, if you see them crying, if you see them sobbing, um, they're looked as being weak or being a coward. It's not a man thing in my family. Uh, Most of my uncles were male dominated, and in the sense where they would get physical with my aunts. They would beat them, and so because that's the normal. Of course, it's not, but that with the exception of my mother, men in my family were very hard on women, and women were supposed to be submissive. So that's it for me.
Hi, I'm Esmeralda Rodriguez, and I also grew up in a Mexican household. So my parents had certain views in mental health and mental illness, as they also grew up with the same stigma surrounding it. So, such as like mental illness was seen as a curse and a burden on your family, or they blamed the mother for consuming this or that while being pregnant, and that child coming out with issues. Seeking mental health in our culture in Mexico was also seen as a weakness, and only the crazy sought help.
Hello, my name is Yami. And so the messages I received when I was a kid was basically that like mental health and mental illness didn't really exist. It wasn't really existent. If you're feeling like you don't want to clean your room, or you feel like overwhelmed in such a weight on your body and you don't feel like brushing your teeth, you're just lazy. You're not depressed. That's kind of what my experience was, and the messages I received as a kid. My I lived in like a family home where my aunt was involved a lot, and as the oldest in my mom's culture, they're kind of just like told to like what she says is right. So a lot of the times, that's what she said. And she was really religious. So, anything wrong with you, God can heal you. You don't need to see a therapist, and there's nothing really a therapist can do to help you. You're just lazy, or you're overthinking it, or there's no fixing it. Like you're actually just crazy is like the terms that she would use. Luckily, my mom was a little like open minded about it, but overall, like that was like the messages my brothers and I received often, and also what we saw like firsthand happening with like her kids. So yeah.
My name is Tyler, and culturally in my family, we're predominantly white, but I have a little bit of my mother's side is Chinese, and she kind of grew up with both of those cultures all at once. And it wasn't really until like I was growing up that like my parents kind of noticed like the stigma that they faced, in their youth for having these strict gender roles and strict stigmas on mental health. Like for example, my father was always like told that he couldn't cry and he had to be tough. And like my mom was also kind of thrown into this role that she had to be like a housewife by this and married by this age. And my parents ended up getting married very young. And while they're still together, it's very they were very encouraged to like change that stigma when I started growing up. And even with that traditional setting, when I was growing up, it wasn't really talked about. But as I got older, it seems like my parents kind of like grew with me and we all kind of like learned about it at the same time. And it was just like I started going to therapy and it kind of opened up like an interest for me to start a career in therapy. And then that kind of changed the way that we viewed it. So it was kind of a little bit like it started off, but we didn't really know much. And then as time went on, we learned more.
Okay, so in terms of awareness of resources, the question is, what resources were you aware were available for mental health, if any, when you were growing up prior to pursuing your MFT degree? If you were not aware of mental health resources earlier in life, what are your thoughts about that? So, as I mentioned, that obviously what I'm hearing from everybody is there is a certain type of stigma here. And same, it was in my country as well when I was growing up. So, with that said, there were no resources. We were aware that there is a profession called psychiatrist or psychologist, but somehow it was just somewhere out there, like for someone else, but it's not for us. So, no, there we weren't aware of any resources, and anybody who had any kind of mental issues, they were more like not supported, like almost put down or looked down upon instead of having resources available for them.
Well, for me, I didn't know that this field existed as far as the LMFT world. My impression was that counseling was geared more towards psychology and psychiatry. Uh, but with the exception of some school counselors, I was working for a mental health institution called the Los Angeles Child Guidance Clinic back in 2002. I was there as a receptionist, answering phones and scheduling appointments, but that's all I knew. I didn't know what was going on behind the scenes. And so yes, but I'm glad I'm here learning a lot more.
I grew up in an underserved community made up largely of minority groups, specifically Hispanics. So we all relied on the same small local community health clinic at that time that offered one licensed clinical counselor that actually traveled amongst the other local small community clinics. That's all the resources that we were aware of at the time.
So for me, I did grow up pretty aware of the different resources. I did have my middle brother, he did have like behavioral issues growing up. So I did see like him go to therapy often and counseling. On top of that, we did grow up with an addict in the family. So my mom did, luckily she didn't listen to my aunt and she signed us up for therapy. So I did go to therapy when I was in like middle school and high school. And I also had like counselors that worked with me that would actually like pull me out of class and we would have a discussion. I would have therapists that pulled me out of class and we discussed things, over. So I was aware of like the resources. We did have family therapy too. So yeah, I was pretty aware before taking this course, and it's partly reason why I'm doing it because I also experienced like where therapists like lacked. Like sometimes I noticed like they weren't really listening, like they were hearing me, but they weren't like actively listening. which, kind of affected me, which also was the reason why as a kid I didn't really want to do therapy because I felt like I was getting nowhere. But yeah.
And then prior to my degree, when I was in high school, I took a psychology class just because I was curious about it. And from that, it kind of just like opened up this like can of worms of like learning about not just psychology as a whole and not just like the MFT, career path and licensure, just like learning about the community as well and learning how to be an advocate and also learning how to help others. And so, since I was in high school, I've always been very informed and I've always tried to stay very informed. And even, working in case management, I've done some advocacy work, working in homeless shelters and community clinics as well. So I've been very, very familiar with a lot of these resources.
All right, so question 3. How do you think that mental health stigma can contribute to cross-cultural barriers to care? So mental health stigma is very alive, as we heard just through our conversations. And professionals like us, we need to be advocates for our clients and especially for marginalized groups and for people from other cultures, because as we seen it, different cultures approach this issue differently. And so for us, it's important to know that yes, this exists, and yes, it's our responsibility to support our clients to stop that the existence of stigma.
Well, for me, I think stigma can I guess it depends on the culture. Like there are many cultures that do struggle with mental health, as um, we just now discovered. It's not just in Mexico, and we know it's not just in the United States, but it's also in other countries as well that this is happening to. It does cause like a distress, and things can be misinterpreted. There's fear of social consequences and distrust in systems. It can be perceived as maybe even unsafe in some cultures. So there could be a lot of biases and discrimination that can go around if we're not well educated on what mental health really is.
And I think that mental health stigma, is seen and heard in every culture. And this contributes to this cross-cultural barriers to care because we fear what others may think of us. We feel ashamed and feel that others do not understand us or, they're judging us. That's what I think it contributes to.
Sorry, I'm having a hard time finding my unmute button. Yeah, I kind of agree with all you guys were saying. I just kind of wanted to, for this question, I just kind of wanted to like talk about my experience real quick with that. Like, the stigma really did, like, I remember when I went and looked for therapy, I thought to myself, like, oh, what if I can't adopt a child in the future because people would think I'm like crazy or weak or, from like the aspect of like my cultural and like work wise, like, oh, what if I can't get a job because like they know I'm getting therapy, so that the stigma around mental health illness and getting help, affected me, as an adult. And so, yeah, just interesting to see how like that can affect other people. I'm sure it's not just me. And, I'm someone who's been in school for a while and even I felt to those stigmas. So.
I feel like it contributes a lot to cross-cultural barriers to care and kind of going off of a little bit of what everybody else said. Definitely like, working in a community clinic, you do see a lot of people and you do work with a lot of people who often will cancel their appointments because, they're kind of afraid of going out of the house and they're afraid of, addressing certain concerns For example, when I worked in case management, I had an experience where I had a client and we usually do like an intake assessment before we enroll them in the case management program. And she just didn't feel comfortable disclosing certain aspects of her life. So she eventually just kind of withdrew. And while I tried to be supportive and stuff, sometimes there's just people who just they have this, stigma within themselves and with other people that like they're going to be judged for just being who they are or the habits that they have or even the culture that they have.
And finally, our last question is, how do you think that your own exposure to mental health stigma may influence your ability to prioritize self-care once you start seeing clients? And the second part to that question is, what is your plan to prioritize self-care once you start seeing clients? I think self-care, at least for me, it's very, very important because this is the profession where you can get burnout easily, dealing with all kinds of issues. And on top of that, mental health stigma comes in play, and it's you burn out easily. And I think self-care is it should be priority. And so how do I plan to prioritize self-care? When I see clients, I just schedule it in my calendar. I just it's a me time. I know for me, for right now, my number one self-care is that I get enough sleep because I know if I don't have those hours that I need, then I can't even focus clearly. So that for me is number one, that I have my sleep. And then there are other things like I like to walk in nature. I love nature. I like to go out and walk and spend time outside, and that's so refreshing. So like I feel like I cleansed, and I can just start again and work with clients or do whatever I need to do.
Okay. And for me, well, I'm a little bit dyslexic, so I have to reread this again. How do you think your own exposure to mental health stigma may influence your ability to prioritize yourself once you start seeing clients? Um, I am a Mexican immigrant. I am part of the LGBTQIA plus community. I've been involved in domestic violence. I've been involved with childhood abuse and also drug and alcohol addiction. So all of that, of course, I'm going to be able to use, I guess, in my favor, to help me navigate through a lot of these sessions that I'm going to be encountering with when I'm dealing with people and, to address this mental health stigma. And so a lot of this is going to have a influence on how I navigate the mental health care to how I cater to my clients. And so how am I going to prioritize myself, to ensure that I'm being taken care of myself? So for one, I'm going to need to have I need to love myself first, before I can start loving somebody else. And so I need to take care of my own needs, have
Mhm.
some me time, intentionally maybe take some time off, relax, go watch some Netflix. I don't know, go get a haircut, go shopping. I love shopping. So, doing things like that, or even watching short novels that will brighten up my day, and even seeking supervision, I think will be important for me to start fostering like a better relationship with my clients.
Um, Me for self-care, as mentioned, is really important in our health field. Um, Especially, for like us individually, we should be emotionally and mentally stable so that we can continue to help our clients. It helps prevent also us imposing our own values and beliefs on them. And in order for me to continue to seek therapy, I will continue to seek therapy for myself. I do currently have therapy sessions, but with my daughter who's autistic, so we're still navigating all that, and there's challenges and obstacles everywhere. So therapy itself for us individually is also very important, as well as, seeking consultation with like our supervisors and colleagues. I think that will also help with our own self-care.
Okay, so for me, I feel like the exposure to the mental health stigma may actually make me believe like, oh, I'm a therapist. I should be able to handle all this stress, and avoid self-care. I might just, tell myself I have to push through this exhaustion and maybe not seek help. So I think for self-care, I need to remind myself to take it slow. Um, I think a lot of times I tend to avoid seeking help just because, like, I'm really afraid of bothering people all the time. So I think just pushing myself to seek help when I need it or I'm feeling overwhelmed. Also, creating boundaries around my workload to avoid burnout. Because, like some of you were saying, in order to be the best therapist, we got to be our best. So, definitely making sure I'm taking care of myself in order for me to help my clients the best way possible.
I think for my exposure to mental health stigma, but sorry, I have to read the question over again. Once I start seeing clients, I feel like my own exposure, like with my own experience working in case management and like, also working in a residential treatment center, I feel like I've seen a lot, so like nothing really like surprises me anymore. So I feel like I'm kind of just like able to remain neutral and just calm, like regardless of like, what's going on. Because I feel like I've seen like almost like the worst of the worst. But the biggest thing for me, especially kind of reflecting back in those times where I didn't really know how to handle myself back then, the biggest form of self-care for me was like exercising or like just moving around. Like I would do yoga, I would go for a walk, I would, even just do like jumping jacks in my room or just like small little workouts like that. And I think the biggest thing for me is just kind of like keeping my body moving because I would tend to get like a little bit of anxiety and just it just feels like it wasn't going anywhere. So I felt like I need to let it out. I need to release this anxiety and I'm going to feel much better. And that is something I do want to translate into the work with my clients of like, prioritizing, getting that workout in and letting myself, de-stress that way. And yeah.
Perfect. 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 Yeah, there's a lot of things that we are so lucky to be in this field and learning about everything that's going on. I believe we were able to cover all of the questions. Is this correct, team?
Yeah.
Yes.
Looks good.
Yeah, sounds like.
Yes.
Great. Okay, so then I will go ahead and end recording. Thank you so much for everyone's participation. And I hope to meet with you guys again next week.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.